family members who then share it. So that's, a pattern that in terms of, I have debriefed, if you look at this list, there's 760 whistleblowers and witnesses, but I've met with more. Some of them I never quite get their name. There's probably over 1,000. But all the people on that list I've debriefed. Over 34 years. So I carry that in my head, which is why I'm trying to put some of this down, in case something happens to me.
Which president have you had direct contact with, you spoke to, that is interested in this?
I've never spoken directly with any of the presidents.
You've never spoken
only people who've been on their cabinet or people who have been like the CIA director or people who worked with them. No, I've never met with any of them directly. All of them been asked to.
Any of the recent, who's the most recent, most powerful people you've spoken to that's reached out to you?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think by far this former chairman of this Fortune 50 company. He's holding all the cards.
Is he respected by a lot of people? Is he somebody that has a reputation?
Oh, yes, he is. He would be. Yeah, he very much would.
He would be. So okay, as a president, you get to campaign. I'm going to run for president 2024. I'm campaigning for human rights. We're going to fix the border. We're going to go. Climate change is the number one issue, and the economy is stupid, and then we're going to focus on all this stuff, right? All these things that they say they're campaigning on. Okay, great. What's the riskiest thing to campaign on? Let me kind of give you a couple of them, and you tell me, okay? One, here's what my campaign is going to be. Why is it that only 2 countries in the world allow big pharma to advertise on TV? Us and New Zealand. Why are all the other countries not allowing that to happen? If you help me become president, day one executive order, big pharma will not be able to advertise on TV, just like cigarette and tobacco companies cannot, okay? There's a lot of risk with that, okay? You're going after a lot of strong people, right?
Oh, yeah.
Number two, as your president, I think one of the things that you as a taxpayer are owed the truth. And I think this government, in the recent years, we used to be an open source type of a country when Washington and all the guys ran it. Today, we are no longer open source. If you help me become president, I'm going to release all the 6,000 patents in the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, and I want to make sure you know all about it, and it's going to help a lot of you guys. You're going to save money on electricity. You're going to save money on oil, and cars are going to be able to run on this because it's going to help us with this, and it's going to help us with pollution, and we're no longer going to deal with poverty worldwide. It's never. You help me. I'm going to make sure all that becomes public, okay? You help me become president. I'm going to give the truth of what happened with CIA, and I'm going to release the last 15% of the information to know who assassinated John F. Kennedy. You help me become president. All of these things I'm going through. What is the riskiest one for your life that if you say you're going to do that, ain't nobody going to help you, and it's the riskiest position to take?
Well, I think in terms of your own personal security, it'd probably be this issue, the UFO and UAP issue.
Why though? Why would that be?
Because behind it is the whole center of power that was running the planet, the technology. Because if that comes out, all of it's coming out. Look, anybody with a grain of sense, and this is where we're getting really close, like when the Pentagon confirmed that UAP that we chased off the coast of California was real and three-dimensional and not an artifact or a misperception, broad daylight. What they admitted to, without saying it, is that there's something that's there that's three-dimensional and real that is absolutely defying the aerodynamics and energy of anything known by the public. Now, not known to man, and certainly not known to these clandestine programs. But so going into that, then you're also, here's the other big risk. The only reason this could have been kept secret is that the big corporate media, left, right, center, all of it is corrupt. There's a whole section in here about
You're convinced all of it is corrupt.
Absolutely corrupt. And the proof of it is, why would they, given what we've already put on the street and had press conferences around, and right here, 122 named whistleblowers. Why isn't that being covered by Fox, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post? So if you go in here, you will see that on certain issues, the media is actually the most culpable. for the secrecy, because the fourth estate, which is what the media is called, and is supposed to be a watchdog against these excesses of the government and abuses of power. And we're talking the biggest abuse of power in my lifetime, and certainly in the last 70 to 80 years. And why wouldn't there be investigations on that? So let me tell you a little story. It's apocryphal. But Mike Wallace was a famous reporter for 60 Minutes on CBS. A good friend of his named Bob Schwartz was on the board of Time Life. I knew him very well. And I was at a meeting in New York back in the 90s. And Mr. Schwartz told me about how Mike Wallace had gotten some government documents from a source about the UFO issue. And he said, this is the biggest story in history. This is the biggest secret in U.S. history. And he was going to do a 60-minute special on it. At the time, Westinghouse, the defense contractor, owned CBS, and basically out from the top, Mike Wallace was told, you'll do no such thing. And he went into a very deep depression. In fact, he went on Larry King and admitted he'd become suicidal because he realized he was a fraud. He used that word. Now, he didn't tell this part of the story. His friend Bob Schwartz told me at a salon, in New York, I think.
He told Larry King he thinks he's a fraud?
Mike Wallace did. You can go find that thing. He says, why were you? I said, well, I just thought I was a fraud. And so somewhere in there. Now, I saw that episode, and what Bob Schwartz said, Robert Schwartz said, look, he was so devastated because he thought, here we are, the premier investigative journalist. We take on anything. He had never been told he couldn't do a story. He was not allowed to do this story. He was flat out stood down, sat down hard and said, no, you will not. Now, I have dealt with many media people very high up, and they've had the same thing happen to them. There was a guy named Ira Rosen who was the executive producer of 2020 and Primetime Live. And after the first National Press Club event that we did in 2001, May, it's 23 years ago, he approached me and he wanted to have this first sort of tranche of whistleblowers and witnesses come forward. And so he came out to my home, my farm in Virginia, near University of Virginia, and I gave him 35 digital hours of summaries of these testimony and hundreds of pages of government documents. He says, if this is true, this is the biggest story ever in U.S. history. I said, yeah, it is. So I said, but I don't think they're going to let you do it. He said, oh, I'm the executive producer of this and that. He had been with, by the way, 60 Minutes. And I think he's back there now. I'm not sure. Anyway, this is a long time ago, 20-some years ago. And I said, Ira, I don't think they're going to let you. A couple weeks later, he calls me up. He says, well, Dr. Greer, you're right. They won't let me do this story. I said, oh, Ira, who are they? And he says, Dr. Greer, you know who they are. And so we stayed in touch for a few years. Now, I can tell you account after account after account like that. So when you get really close to truth, now if you cover nonsense or something that's disinformation or, I was attacked by an alien and raped and have babies floating around Alpha Centauri, they'll cover that. I mean, the media will be happy to cover nonsense. But when you have hard evidence,
interesting,
they're not going to cover it. And I don't care how high you think you are in that food chain in the media. I challenge anyone listening to do that. Now, look what happened to Tucker Carlson. I don't know if you know who Tucker Carlson is. He was on Fox.
I was on the show a month ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to be on it. But see, he got gaslit. He had a whole bunch of disinformation people come to him and provided him with enormous amount of false information. And so one of the problems is, a little knowledge is a very dangerous thing on this issue. And it's very easy for someone with a limited amount of access and information to have people come in and steer them in the direction of the aliens are eating us for lunch and taking our babies, right? That whole rubbish. But that is really the stock in trade. So if you move in that direction, doors will open. If you actually start putting out the truth, every door will close. Same thing with Hollywood. I had Arnold Kupelson, who was a huge billion-dollar producer back in the 90s. And you'll see in the archive, 1997, I did a congressional briefing offsite with the first early gathering, or the second early gathering of whistleblowers. The first gathering was 1995. at Asilomar in California. This was 97 in D.C., but at the Georgetown Weston. And so members of Congress came, and Dan Burton, who was chairman of Oversight, came, and this was all, there were really people really were very interested in hearing this. This was not public. It wasn't in the news. And what I found was one of the men who came, he was going to tell the members of Congress that next day. We had a day first where we met about having been on an interagency committee back in the 70s where they could hit a button basically and stage an alien attack on the planet and all that. And that all that had been in place before he got there, and I think it was 73 or 4. That night, some guys that he had worked with came to the hotel, took him from his hotel room to a secure site out in Virginia until those briefings for members of Congress was over. Now, some of the raw footage of that meeting is in this archive now. It was old high 8 or VHS tape. It is not cinematic. It's not a production, but it's interesting, very interesting.
Ever since you released this, has anybody weird reached out to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, people weird reach out to me all the time, but
I'm talking threats. I'm talking we're going to release this thing you did 22 years ago.
Oh, sure.
Stuff
that happens all the time. I just ignore it, and I have. What's good with the folks who are around me now, they monitor what's going on around me. One of your friends before we came in here asked me this, and I said, nothing like that's going to happen and not be known. And so now that there's a SAP stood up to literally arrest and create a criminal case against someone who pulls those kind of illegal operations. You can't threaten. If you threaten someone, that is in itself a crime, right?
Yeah, but they do it all the time.
But they do it all the time.
Regular Tuesday for them.